My father was already up, parked at the edge of the driveway in his wheelchair like a general surveying a battlefield. "Grass is getting long," he muttered, his breath visible in the cold air. "Better handle it before the sidewalk tyrant wakes up." I didn't laugh. Not because it wasn't funny, but because he wasn't joking. Willowbrook Estates used to be the kind of place where neighbors waved while they watered their lawns and kids raced their bikes between mailboxes. Now, we lived under surveillance. The HOA president, Dolores Patton, had turned our neighborhood into a spreadsheet of fines, rules, and threats. And we were a favor project. I stepped out onto the porch, coffee in hand, and took in the silence. It was the only time I ever felt alone anymore. No sit-ins. No work radio crackling to life. Just me, the morning dew, and my old manual push mower. I had 38 minutes before my EMT shift started. Not enough time to sleep, but just enough to clear my head. I grabbed the mower. "Marcus," my dad called out, "don't let her get to you." "She already has," I muttered, gripping the handle like a lifeline. "But today, I'm not giving her anything." That was the plan, anyway. The first turn of the blade sliced through the grass like butter, the mower whispering over the lawn with satisfying rhythm. Not a sound louder than a distant coffee grinder. But apparently, that was still too much for Dolores. At precisely 6:17 a.m., she appeared, bathrobe starched, hair perfectly pinned, holding a phone like it was a weapon. Her eyes locked onto me like I'd just torched her azaleas. She said nothing, just raised the phone, tapped, and turned away. Cut to two police cruisers pulling into the neighborhood with lights flashing, blue and red strobes reflecting off mailboxes and minivans. I was still pushing the mower when the officers stepped out, their faces drawn tight with discomfort. "Sir, we got a report of construction noise before legal hours," one said, already pulling out a notepad. I blinked at him, then at my mower. "This?" I gestured, confused. "It's manual. Doesn't even have a motor." The second officer looked from me to Dolores's house, then back again. "Ma'am said you were disturbing the peace. Operating heavy machinery." I looked down at my pajamas, my still steaming mug of coffee on the porch rail. My dad watching from his chair, fists clenched white. "Officer," I said slowly, "this thing makes less noise than a coffee maker." The first officer gave a tight nod. "We believe you." But she called 911. "We have to file a report." That morning, standing on my own lawn in scrubs I hadn't even changed into yet, cuffed like a criminal for mowing grass, I realized something. This wasn't about noise or rules. This was about control. Dolores had declared war, and I'd just been drafted. Flashback 2 weeks earlier. The first warning sign hadn't been the wheelchair complaint or the parking violation. It was the day Dolores handed me a $300 fine for unauthorized damage to shared property. My father had rolled down the sidewalk after a rainstorm. The tires on his chair left faint, almost invisible tracks in the concrete. Gone by noon. But apparently, they'd scarred her delicate sensibilities. "Your father's mobility must be controlled," she'd said, smug behind her clipboard. "We have standards to maintain." I'd stared at her, stunned. My father, Raymond Rodriguez, a 72-year-old Vietnam vet, one leg gone to diabetes, was now an inconvenience. We'd installed ramps, converted the garage into an apartment with grab bars, painted it ourselves after our shifts. My wife, Patricia, a night nurse, hadn't slept a full 8 hours in months. And this woman, this mannequin of manicured tyranny, wanted me to limit his access? Now, as the officers let me go with an apology and a warning to document everything, I knew exactly what I had to do. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every family Dolores had silenced with fear, every blue-collar worker fined for owning a truck, every child scolded for laughing too loud on a Saturday afternoon. This wasn't a neighborhood. It was a battlefield, and I was done playing defense. I didn't sleep after the arrest. Not because I was scared, because I was furious. There's something about being handcuffed on your own lawn, next to your disabled father and a still warm cup of coffee, that burns itself into your memory like a scar. By noon, I'd already printed out city ordinances, noise regulations, and a manual for my push mower. It had fewer decibels than a conversation. I measured, but Dolores didn't care about facts. She cared about control. That evening, Patricia came home from her hospital shift, still in scrubs and fighting exhaustion. I told her everything. The mower, the cops, Dolores watching like a vulture behind lace curtains. She didn't say a word, just set down her thermos, walked into the bedroom, and came back with a manila folder labeled HOA crap. Inside were every violation we'd received since Dolores became president. 16 in 8 months. 3 for grass height. 2 for our trash bins being visible. 1 for a non-standard mailbox, identical to 5 others on the block. And 1 for my EMT van obstructing emergency access, even though it was marked emergency medical transport. She's targeting us, Patricia said finally, slumping into a kitchen chair. Not just us. Everyone who works for a living. She wasn't wrong. The next morning, while walking Ray around the block, I noticed the plumber's truck had a bright yellow tag, same as mine. So did the electrician's van. And Mrs. Ethel's mailbox had a sticky note on it with non-compliant red scrawled in tiny HOA font. These weren't coincidences. This was a pattern. I started asking questions. Quiet ones. Over fences. At mailboxes. In whispers. Have you gotten notices lately? Only since Dolores got elected, Joe the plumber said. She tried to find me for parking in my own driveway. Said it looked industrial. He rolled his eyes. Ethel showed me an envelope from the HOA demanding she repaint her mailbox for fading. I've lived here for 23 years, she snapped. That woman's been here 5 minutes. And the young couple next door? Their toddlers got them a noise complaint for playing in their own backyard at 4 p.m. But here's what pushed me past outrage and into action. Dolores had fined a man for wheelchair tracks. Not metaphorically, literally. A disabled veteran leaving faint, rain-washed marks on concrete. My dad hadn't said much since the arrest. He spent most mornings by the window, watching the neighborhood like he was back on perimeter watch. Quiet, alert, calm. Then one day, while I was on the porch, he wheeled up beside me, balancing a folder on his lap. Military taught me something, he said, handing it to me. You don't win wars with muscle. I built a folder so thick it had sections. Photos, code references, witness logs. My EMT training kicked in. I documented like I was prepping for a lawsuit, which, at this point, was starting to feel inevitable. And still, Dolores escalated. A week after the arrest, we got another violation, this time claiming our garage ramp altered the facade. It was ADA compliant and barely visible from the street. But that was the point. She was hoping we'd cave. Instead, we started organizing. Patricia created a spreadsheet. I printed flyers. Ray became the neighborhood whisper network. We found out Dolores had never gotten community approval for her new standards. No vote, no record, just a clipboard and a smirk. And every fine she issued, $150, $300, $500. But the HOA bylaws, buried in a dusty folder in the county records office, capped fines at $25. Anything more required a supermajority vote, which never happened. I hadn't just been cuffed for mowing grass. I'd been extorted. And Dolores? She was a fraud in heels. I wasn't sure what the endgame looked like yet. But I knew one thing. We weren't backing down. Not anymore. Not when the tyrant next door had weaponized grass height and wheelchair tracks. And definitely not when she made the mistake of calling the wrong EMT at the wrong hour. It started with a garbage truck. One of those big, rumbling municipal beasts that groans and squeals as it grinds down the street like a tired dinosaur. Normally, nobody notices it. But that morning, at 6:15 a.m. sharp, it rolled directly past Dolores's bedroom window. The hydraulics hissed like steam vents. The compactor slammed shut like a cannon, and the backup alarm chirped its piercing chorus into the still morning air. I sipped my coffee from the porch, watching the curtains in Dolores's window twitch like someone trying to swat a mosquito with a spreadsheet. This wasn't an accident. It was an engineering request. I'd spent part of my lunch break the week before at City Hall. Turns out, the city was reviewing waste collection routes due to visibility and safety concerns. I'd even drawn them a map. A new, more efficient route passed directly by Dolores's house instead of reversing down our narrow lane. Less backing, fewer blind spots. I'd explained to the traffic engineer. More efficient. Safer for everyone. He nodded. Makes sense. I didn't mention the HOA war. Didn't need to. By the third day of the reroute, Dolores was on the phone with city services so often the operator started greeting her by name. But she couldn't stop it, because now it was official. Municipal schedule. City approved. Paperwork filed. And the best part? It was legal. Just like mowing at 6 a.m. Just like ADA-compliant ramps. Just like parking 18 inches from the curb. Dolores had declared war using rules. I was going to bury her under them. But then the twist hit me, not from her but from within my own house. Patricia came home early. She looked pale, eyes rimmed red. She sat at the kitchen table like she'd just run a triathlon barefoot. I got called into HR, she said. I froze mid-sip. What? What? They received a complaint about you. She swallowed. About intimidation using medical credentials. Something about you abusing EMT authority to harass neighbors. My stomach dropped. She's coming after you? She nodded. The HR director had to formally review whether our household was engaging in coordinated harassment campaigns. That's insane. You're a nurse. She used my job to threaten you. That's when I realized the battlefield had shifted. This wasn't just fines and measuring tapes anymore. Dolores had crossed a line. She wasn't trying to find me. She was trying to ruin me. I went outside, pacing the edge of the lawn I'd kept at 2.75 inches like a damn golf course. Ray rolled out behind me. What's wrong? I told him everything. HR, the complaint, the rumor campaign. He looked at me like he had in the hospital the night he lost his leg. Calm, controlled, ruthless. She's not fighting for control anymore, he said. She's fighting because she's losing it. I stared at our perfectly edged sidewalk, suddenly feeling like a man who'd been dancing on a minefield thinking it was a chessboard. That night, the flyers appeared. Every mailbox, a grainy black and white photo of me, standing near Dolores's front lawn in my EMT gear. Caption, Neighborhood Alert, resident using medical authority to harass elderly neighbors. It looked official. The HOA logo in the corner. Legal-looking font, printed on glossy stock. Inside, she'd twisted everything. My lawn mowing, my garage ramp, even a photo of me helping her neighbor during a diabetic emergency, cropped to make it look like I was threatening her. She didn't just want to silence me. She wanted to erase me. My EMT license. My reputation. My life. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was furious. Because I was afraid. This was no longer a revenge fantasy or a neighborhood tiff. This was my career on the line. My family's livelihood. And maybe, just maybe my freedom. What if she filed another false police report? One that stuck? What if the next call led to a complaint on my license? A court case? I looked at my father, asleep in his wheelchair near the window. At Patricia, curled up on the couch, too tired to make it to the bedroom. And something cracked inside me. Not fear. Not anger. Resolve. If Dolores wanted war, I'd give her war. But this time, not just with rules and retaliation. With proof. With witnesses. With strategy. No more passive compliance. No more polite counters. I was going to end her entire empire, financially, legally, and publicly. Because this wasn't just about mowing lawns or noise complaints anymore. This was about every person who'd ever been bullied by someone hiding behind rules they didn't even understand. And this time, the bully had made it personal. The first real meeting happened in Ethel's living room. She'd baked snickerdoodles and lemon squares like it was a church potluck, but the mood was closer to wartime strategy. Joe the plumber sat on her floral love seat with blueprints of his truck measurements. Sarah, the young mother next door, who also happened to be a former local reporter, was already cross-referencing HOA bylaws with state statutes. Patricia stood silently by the kitchen counter, arms crossed, wearing the same look she gave ICU residents right before they flatlined. I sat at the head of Ethel's dining table, flipping through a binder 3 inches thick, full of photos, timestamps, city codes, and witness statements. This, I said, holding up the flyer Dolores had distributed about me, was the final straw. We all knew what Dolores had become, a petty tyrant with a clipboard and a grudge. But this was character assassination. She said you were harassing the elderly? Joe barked. Did she forget you literally saved Mrs. Patterson last month? She didn't forget, Sarah said, flipping pages in her folder. She weaponized it. Patricia stepped forward, finally breaking her silence. She went after my job. She tried to destroy our livelihood. What's next? Our license plates? Our kids? That shut the room up. Even Ethel's snickerdoodles couldn't soften that blow. The room filled with tension, like oxygen ready to meet a spark. Ray, my dad, wheeled in from the hallway, holding up a folded envelope. Then it's time, he said. What is it? I asked. County clerk's response, he replied, handing it over. The original Willowbrook HOA charter and bylaws. I had them mailed. I opened the envelope slowly. Inside were faded documents, typed in courier font, signed and pinned back in 1995. State sealed. Official. My eyes scanned the pages and then I saw it. Maximum fine allowed, $25 per violation. All policy changes require 60% homeowner approval by vote. Treasurer co-signature required for expenses over $500. My heart punched the inside of my chest. She never followed any of this. Sarah snatched the papers, flipping to a spreadsheet she'd been building. She's issued over $47,000 in fines in 4 years. All unauthorized. She paid for her own landscaping with HOA funds. Legal consultations. Printing flyers. Patricia was already on her phone. We can report this to the state HOA Oversight Board. And the Real Estate Licensing Bureau, Sarah added. She's cooked, Joe muttered. This is fraud. She's stealing from us. No, I said quietly. She already stole. This is about getting it back. The next few days felt like building a case against a mob boss. Except the mob boss wore beige pumps and drove a white BMW with vanity plates that read, Homes for you. We moved carefully. Patricia compiled financial documentation. Sarah drafted posts for a private Facebook group we named Willowbrook for Fair HOA. Within days, we had 31 members. Then 42. By the end of the week, more than half the neighborhood had joined, each with their own violation stories, receipts, photos. Joe installed security cameras. Ethel gathered signed complaints. My dad personally called the ADA office to file a grievance about the ramp violation and wheelchair citations. But the most powerful blow came from Mrs. Patterson herself. She wrote an open letter. Typed, signed, copied. Marcus Rodriguez saved my life. Dolores used a photo of that moment to lie. This is evil masquerading as policy. It spread like wildfire. We put in every mailbox, taped it to lampposts, posted it online. The neighborhood changed overnight. People who once hid behind curtains started waving again. Residents who whispered about violations began sharing their own. And for the first time, Dolores wasn't the one holding the clipboard. We were. But she didn't go quietly. 3 days later, 22 violation notices appeared in mailboxes overnight. Joe's truck? Too tall. Sarah's kids? Noise complaint at 3 p.m. Ethel's mailbox? Color still non-conforming. Me? A $500 fine for coordinated disruption of community peace. We all received them, and we all laughed. Because now, every notice she sent was another nail in her own coffin. Let her keep digging, I told Patricia. She's building our case for us. But beneath the defiance, I felt something else. Wait, pressure. Because Dolores wasn't just losing power, she was unraveling. And desperate people do desperate things. She's cornered. Ray warned that night, sipping tea by the window. And cornered people always swing wild before they fall. I looked at the growing stack of evidence. My wife, my dad, my community. Then I looked at the calendar. 2 weeks until the next HOA board meeting. 2 weeks to finish what she started. 2 weeks to flip the script from victim to victor. It started with the smell of burnt coffee and folding chairs scraping across a linoleum floor. The community center buzzed with nervous energy as 76 residents filed into the room, more than triple the usual HOA meeting attendance. Most clutched manila folders. Some held printed violation notices. A few came with cameras. Dolores sat at the front of the room, spine straight, blazer buttoned, lips pressed so tight you'd think she was holding in a lawsuit. Her attorney, a pale man with thick glasses and a laptop covered in legal tabs, whispered something to her. She didn't blink. I stood in the back with Patricia, Ray, and Sarah. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from readiness. For the first time, she looked like the one out of place. The meeting was called to order at 6:03 p.m. Dolores launched right into it. There have been coordinated efforts, she began, to disrupt this community's standards and undermine proper governance. Certain residents, name them, someone called. She ignored it. Have engaged in unauthorized organizing, misinformation, and targeted intimidation of leadership, including myself. That's when I stood. Not fast, not angry, just certain. With respect, I said, you don't get to open this meeting with accusations when over 70 residents have come with questions you've spent 4 years dodging. Dolores's jaw ticked. Her attorney opened his mouth, but the crowd beat him to it. We want transparency. Where did the fine money go? Why is my mailbox a federal offense? Sarah stepped forward, holding up the original HOA charter. We have a 1995 bylaws. Signed, sealed, filed with the county. Her voice was steady, sharp. They say the maximum fine per violation is $25. They say policy changes require a 60% resident vote. And yet we've seen $300 fines issued under rules no one here voted for. The room murmured. Dolores tried to interrupt, but she was already too late. I walked to the front of the room and connected my laptop to the projector. The screen lit up. Slide 1. Timeline of unauthorized rule changes dates. Documents. No resident votes. No board minutes. Slide 2. Financial discrepancies receipts showing HOA funds spent on landscaping at Dolores's home. $8,000 on legal consultations for personal real estate. Thousands on professional printing. Slide 3. False enforcement patterns only working-class residents find. Only families with work vans, kids, or disabled members cited. Photos. Dates. Witness statements. A color-coded map. Slide 4. ADA violations, HOA, fines against wheelchair-accessible ramps. Formal complaint filed with the state. Ongoing investigation. The silence was absolute. Even the air conditioner seemed to stop. Ray wheeled forward and handed me the final folder. Inside, a printed statement from Mrs. Patterson, the elderly neighbor whose emergency I'd responded to. The same woman Dolores had used as fake evidence in her character assassination flyers. I cleared my throat and read aloud. Marcus Rodriguez saved my life during a diabetic emergency. Dolores Peton used a photo of that moment to spread lies. He acted with compassion. She acted with malice. I looked up. Dolores was pale. Her hands clutched the sides of her chair like she was falling through it. A woman in the back yelled, "You used Mrs. Patterson?" And just like that, the crowd turned. Joe stood next. My truck got cited after 5 years parked in the same spot. Sarah followed. My toddler's got a noise violation for existing. Ethel rose, slow and deliberate. She took $900 from me for mailbox color. I live on Social Security. The sound of paper slapping against the floor echoed as people dropped violation notices in protest. Then came the final blow. A woman in a gray blazer stood near the exit and raised her badge. I'm Investigator Monroe from the State HOA Oversight Board. We've been reviewing these documents for the past 2 weeks. We've frozen all HOA accounts pending a full audit. Gasps. Murmurs. Someone clapped. Monroe continued. Preliminary findings suggest over $31,000 in unauthorized expenditures. Multiple governance violations. Potential fraud. Civil and criminal charges are being prepared. Dolores stood abruptly, knocking over her chair. Her attorney whispered something urgent, but she wasn't listening anymore. "This is a witch hunt," she snapped, her voice cracking. "You're all just jealous. You need structure. Without me, this place would fall apart." That's when Ray spoke, and it was quiet enough that everyone heard him. "We didn't fall apart when you arrived. We fell silent." The vote for immediate removal was unanimous. Dolores didn't wait for the final count. She stormed out, high heels clicking like gunfire against the tile. Her attorney trailed behind her, collecting what was left of her empire in a manila folder and a red face. Outside, as the sun set over Willowbrook, neighbors stood in clusters, laughing, crying, hugging. For the first time in years, we weren't watching our backs. We were watching each other, and we weren't afraid anymore. 3 weeks later, the trash truck still rolled past Dolores's house every morning at 6:15 a.m. But now nobody complained. The street was alive again. Lawns didn't all match down to the millimeter. Some had overgrown edges. A few mailboxes didn't quite match. And nobody cared. The neighborhood felt like a neighborhood again, not a gated exhibit. People waved from porches. Kids screamed with the joy only summer can allow. Joe's truck sat proudly in his driveway, tools glinting in the sun like a badge of honor. And Dolores's house? Empty. For sale. The Homes for You plates were gone, replaced by a simple by owner sign that no one ever called. I sat on the porch, coffee in hand, same spot where this all started. The morning was quiet, peaceful, but not empty. Ray was beside me, reading the paper out loud, something he hadn't done since the war with Dolores began. Patricia had the day off, her laugh drifting from the backyard where she watered the tomatoes she never used to have time to grow. There was something sacred about the stillness now. Not silence. Freedom. A knock came at the door. It was Sarah and Ethel, holding a worn HOA binder, now updated, rewritten, and legally compliant. "We want you to be interim president," Sarah said. I blinked. "Absolutely not." They laughed. "Okay," Ethel said, "but at least help us rewrite the new neighbor welcome letter. No threats. No fines. Just kindness." That I could do. Later that evening, I walked the block. It had become my habit, a slow loop around the cul-de-sac, nodding to faces I now knew by name. Near the corner, a young couple waved as their toddler chased a butterfly. The same couple who'd once gotten a noise complaint. At house number 12, Mr. Jenkins was repainting his fence, this time in a wild shade of teal no one would have dared before. And outside number 18, the new family unloading moving boxes from a U-Haul asked me, "Is this a good place to raise kids?" I looked around. At the sidewalk ran my dad, now used without worry. At the truck in Joe's driveway. At the children running barefoot without fear of fines. "It is now," I said. Later that night, I stood at the end of my driveway, the sky turning dark above Willowbrook. No sirens. No shouting. Just stars blinking overhead like they were breathing. Ray rolled up beside me. "She ever apologize?" he asked quietly. "No," I said. He nodded. "Good. That would have ruined it." I smiled. "Funny thing," I said, "the morning after the vote, she left early. Packed up in the dark, avoided everyone. But you know what she forgot?" "What?" "Her clipboard." Ray chuckled. "You still have it." "Framed it." We laughed quietly. Not because it was a joke. Because it was over. Some battles end with gunfire. Some with signatures. Ours ended with a neighborhood learning how to stand together. We didn't become perfect, but we became real again. No one needed an alarm clock anymore. Not for fear. Not for war. Only for mourning.